Hello dear students, welcome to 2zion.com. In today's session, we are going to see about the central nervous system. So what does the central nervous system comprises of? It comprises of the brain and the spinal cord. What does it do? The central nervous system, especially the brain and the spinal cord, gives command to our body and also controls our body from various activities. So shall we get into the topic? The first subdivision will be the layers of the brain. And of course, the layers of the brain can be divided under three heads. The first one will be the forebrain, the hindbrain, and the midbrain. Now let's see the location of the brain and the layers of the brain. It is located or it is enclosed in a skull. And of course, this skull is nothing but the cranial cavity. What does this cranial cavity is? The cranial cavity composed of the cranial nerves and the facial bones. And these together protect our skull. Now let's see the layers of the brain. There are about 3 layers of our brain. The first one will be the dura mater. The second one will be the pia mater. The third one will be the arachnoid mater. What is this dura mater? The dura mater is the outermost layer, while the arachnoid mater is the middle layer. And last but not the least, the pia mater. The pia mater is the innermost layers of the brain. What is the function of the dura mater? The dura mater supports the central nervous system, especially the spinal cord. If you are able to stand erect, and that is because of this dura mater, it protects the spinal cord from any shocks and friction. What is the function of the arachnoid mater? The arachnoid mater protects the nervous system, the complete set of the nervous system. And of course, the inner layer, the pia mater, of course, it protects and it gives a complete support to the central nervous system. So these are the different layers of our brain. Next, we'll get into the divisions of the brain. What are the divisions of the brain? The divisions of the brain can be divided under 3 heads, and the first one will be the forebrain. The second one will be the midbrain, and the third one will be the hindbrain. What is this forebrain is? As you can see in the picture here, the forebrain is divided into the cerebrum and diencephalon. The cerebrum is again divided under 2 heads. The one will be cerebral cortex and the cerebral medulla. Of course, the cerebrum is a seat of intelligence. If you and I are so intellectual, that is because of the cerebrum. Let's see about the diencephalon. What is this diencephalon is? The diencephalon is called as a processing unit, and the processing unit especially in the sensory cells. The cerebrum is a seat of intelligence, and of course it has a second division called the cortex, and the cortex has many dendrites. Here it is again divided into 2 different cells. One will be the glia cells and the next one will be the blood vessels. What are these glia cells or the glial cells are? The glial cells gives the hemostatic substance, that is, it gives hemostasis to our body, which means it maintains our body according to the temperature. It alters our body according to the temperature. If the surrounding environment is too cold, we are getting adapted. That is because of the glial cells. And of course, the cerebrum has many folds, just as you can see in the picture which is shown. It has many folds, and that folds are called as the gyri. The folded layers are called as the gyri. Here, the gyri again has many grooves or the hollow parts, and it is again gives rise to the next part called the sulci. Here, the gyri and the sulci, they give the cognitive abilities, the thinking abilities, the reasoning abilities, and capable of reading, of understanding. Everything comes from this gyri and sulci. Now, this sulci is again divides the cerebrum. It divides the cerebrum into three different parts. The first one will be the frontal lobe, which we already saw in the last class. The frontal lobe is nothing but it gives the intelligence. It makes the behavior, it channels the behavior of a person. The memory retentivity or the memory power comes from this frontal lobe. And finally, the movements. If you and I can move and alter our locomotion, that is because of the frontal lobes. The next one will be the parietal. The parietal is nothing but it helps in the sensation, in understanding the language. The temporal lobes, when you talk of the temporal lobes again divided under three categories. It functions under three categories. The first one, it helps to alter the speech pattern. The second one, the memory power. Just like how the frontal gives, even this temporal gives the memory power. And finally, the hearing. The hearing power comes from this temporal lobe, from the cerebrum of our brain, which is exactly the forebrain. And finally, the occipitals. As the word occipitals, it helps in vision, in visualizing, or in processing the sensory, in processing the sensory unit, in channelizing the vision. So these are the layers of the forebrain. The next one, what does this forebrain is? And of course, just now we saw this forebrain forms the largest portion of the brain, and it is again divided into the cerebrum and the diencephalon. The diencephalon. The main function of the diencephalon is, it is a processing unit. It is the processing unit of the brain in response to the sensory system as well as to the autonomic nervous system. What are these autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system regulates various movements in our body. It regulates the heart, it regulates the digestion, it also able to produce the digestive juices, and also it helps in the respiratory process. So these are the functions of the diencephalon, especially the autonomic nervous system. The diencephalon can be again divided under three heads. The first division will be the epithalamus, the thalamus, and hypothalamus. So what is the function of the epithalamus? Of course, it lies in the posterior section, especially in the posterior position of the diencephalon, and it forms a roof, especially to the ventricles, the third ventricles in the brain. What is the function of this epithalamus? The epithalamus helps in channelizing the signals, or it sends the impulses from the brain to the rest of the body, and that is the main function of this epithalamus. The thalamus. What is the function of this thalamus? It regulates the muscles like the cardiac muscles, the striated muscles, and all the types of the muscles in our body. It coordinates with it, and also it helps in controlling the hormone system in our body. So that is the main purpose of this thalamus. The next one will be the hypothalamus. Of course, the hypothalamus, the main function of the hypothalamus is that it maintains the hemostasis, which means it regulates the body temperature. If you and I can adapt to the present situation or the present environment, that is because of the functioning of the hypothalamus. In case of mentally challenged, this doesn't work. The brain doesn't function properly, so they're not able to identify where they are and they don't respond to the stimuli. That's what, even when you beat them, they don't respond. Even when you treat them in any other way, they don't respond. That is because the brain does not respond, and so they don't respond to the external stimuli. So the main function of the hypothalamus is it helps to regulate the body temperature. In other ways, or in biologically, it is said it is the process of hemostasis, and that is the main function of the hypothalamus. The next slide will be the brainstem. What is this brainstem is? This brainstem has many cerebral peduncles. Now, what is the function of this cerebral peduncles? The main function of the brainstem is that it maintains the body. That is, it maintains the balance. If you are able to balance any situation, that is because of the brainstem, and even your head can stand erect, that is because of the balancing, especially by the brainstem. And when you talk about the brainstem, as you see in the figure, it has 4 important ovid structures. Let's quickly see what are the functions of the brainstem is. The brainstem has 4 boidal structures or the round structures, and what is that structure called as? Corpus quadrigemina. The main function of this corpus quadrigemina is that it helps in coordination, especially in hearing and vision. These are the 2 functions of the corpus quadrigemina. And also the hindbrain. The hindbrain consists of the 4 important factors, the next 4 important parts. Before we go into the forebrain, let's see about the rhombencephalon. The rhombencephalon is also located in the hindbrain, in the midbrain. And what is the function of that? It helps in the respiration, in the cardiac rhythm, especially the lup-tup, the sounds of the heart. All this is coordinated by the rhombencephalon. The next part of our brain will be the hindbrain. The hindbrain is again divided under 3 heads. The first one will be the cerebellum, the second one will be the pons varolii, and the third one will be the medulla oblongata. So what is the function of the hindbrain, especially the cerebellum? The cerebellum is the second largest unit in the brain. The main functions of the cerebellum are: it helps in problem solving, it also helps in thinking, reasoning, and also plays a great role in emotions. We are suddenly disturbed by emotions around us, and that emotion is created by the cerebellum. The next part of our brain will be the pons. The next part will be the coordination in plants. So what is coordination in plants? Plants do not have any nervous system. They do not have any nervous system, or they do not have any endocrine system. But even then they respond to the stimuli. So the response in stimuli in plants are completely coordinated by the hormones. Now what are these hormones? These hormones again are called as the chemical messengers, because they respond to the external factors, the factors which is outside, the external factors. When you talk about the external factors, it is the light, the gravitational force or the gravity, the water and the temperature. So in plants, there are many cells, the parenchyma cells, the sclerenchyma cells, the collenchyma cells, and there are many cells. Now these cells, the cells inside the organism or inside the plant, they detect the stimulus, and they take the response, especially from the external factors, and that is the coordination which is seen in the plants. The next movement will be, the last movement will be the nastic movement. What is this nastic movement is? The nastic movement can be defined as a non-directional movement of plants, especially in response to the external stimuli. The external stimuli, I can tell you, it's the light, the temperature, and all the other factors. The nastic movements can be again divided under the two heads. The first division will be the epinasty, and the next division will be the hyponasty. What is this epinasty is? Of course, this epinasty is nothing but it's the term which donates or which initiates the leaf movement, especially in response to bend or to curve towards the downside, and that is called as the epinasty. So I repeat again, the epinasty is nothing but it is a general location, or it's a general term which gives notation, it denotes the leaf, especially the bending and the curving of the leaves in response, that is especially towards the downside, and that is called as the epinasty. And what is this hyponasty is? The term is specially used to donate or to initiate the leaves which bend the upward direction, and that is called as the nastic movement, and that nastic movement is called as the hyponasty. So these are the different movements which is seen in the plants. So long we saw about the phototropism, we saw about the chemotropism, we saw what is the nastic movement and how the nastic movement can again be divided into, it can be divided into epinasty and also the hyponasty. We saw what is geotropism is, the roots which starts to grow in search of the plants bends and it starts to grow underground, especially the roots positively enter inside the soil, and that is called as the geotrophism. And what is hydrotrophism? Especially the plants goes in search of water. So all these are the movements which is seen in the plants. So hence this endocrine glands is a complex substances or the complex system of glands and organs that mainly helps in regulating many the bodily functions and reactions, and all this is achieved only by the endocrine glands as they releases the chemical messengers. That's why hormones are called as the chemical messengers. These endocrine glands, they not only secrete the chemicals, but they are also responsible to generate and secrete various chemical compounds. The chemical compounds which is generated especially in the body, what happens? What does it does? It controls the cell. It not only controls the cell, but also it controls the organ to function. So the hormones, when you talk about the hormones, it controls the body growth, the metabolism. The metabolism involves the body's physical and the chemical processes. And the sexual development, the sexual development and the functions, especially during the time of adolescence. The hormones are also released into the bloodstream, especially it is released in the bloodstream to have a effective, to have a potential to affect one or more organs in the body. So this is the total function of the endocrine. So the endocrine system is otherwise called as the ductless gland, and this ductless gland is again divided under 5 to 6 heads. The first one will be the pituitary gland, especially the hypothalamus plays a very important role, and that is why it is called as the master gland. The pituitary gland is otherwise called as the master gland of our body. And of course, it controls and it coordinates the other organs and other glands. And when you take this thyroid gland, it initiates, it regulates the growth and the rate of the metabolism, and also initiates it controls the temperature of our body. That is the main character of this thyroid gland. And it also has the parathyroid glands. It secretes the necessary levels of calcium and phosphorus in our body level. And of course, the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands can produce the hormones that helps to regulate. It helps to regulate and balance the salts and the water in our body. When you take about this ovaries, what does this ovaries does? The ovaries in the females, it helps in the production of the maturation of the egg, especially during the time of reproduction. And what does this testis does? It controls the sexual developments that helps in the production of the sperms. So this is the overview and the function of the endocrine glands. The next one associated function will be the feedback mechanism in our body, especially in response to this endocrine system. So what is this feedback mechanism? The feedback mechanism is nothing but it is a process, it's a mechanical process of the body which helps to maintain the level of the hormones within the limits, within the desired limit, and that is called as the feedback mechanism. And of course, this feedback mechanism can be divided under two heads. The one will be the positive feedback mechanism and the negative feedback mechanism. So what is this positive feedback mechanism is? The body itself has two types of feedback. The first one will be the negative and the positive. The negative feedback mechanism, what does it explains about? So when there is a change, it can be any change that is in the normal state. The messages are sent to increase what? To increase the secretions from the gland. And if there is a sudden fall, or when it falls down below the normal, or when it decreases in the secretion, and of course when it decreases the secretion, and where there is a rise, an immediate rise above the normal, it tries to restore the normal body state. Even if it increases and decreases, it will try to restore the body in the normal state. And such mechanism is called as a negative feedback mechanism. Next, we shall go to the next part, that is called as the positive. What is the positive feedback mechanism? Here also, the increase in the blood sugar, especially the glucose. When there is a rise in the glucose level, when there is a rise in a blood sugar level, it stimulates. What does it stimulate? We already studied in endocrine glands. It stimulates to secrete the insulin, especially in the pancreas, right? We already studied this slide. So it will initiate to secrete the insulin so that the sugar level is maintained in the blood. And supposing if it is maintained, and if the blood falls down, if the sugar level falls below the normal, then this stimulates the secretion of the glucagon. It secretes the function of the glucagon. This glucagon, what does it do? It stimulates, or it initiates the breakdown process of what? Of the glucagon to glucose. So it initiates the breakdown process from the glucagon to glucose, and thus this normal sugar level is maintained, and hence this process is called as a feedback mechanism. So hope you understood what is a feedback mechanism and what are the types of the feedback mechanism. The feedback mechanism is of two types, the positive and the negative feedback mechanism. So this is also one of the important questions in your board exams. So don't forget to learn this. It's very, very important. So before we could end the session for today's class, let's see some of the facts, the important facts of our brain. So it is said that 60% of the human brain is made of the fats. This is one of the important, interesting fact of our brain. And of course, the human brain is not formed until the age of fully, it is not fully formed until the age of 25. This is also one of the interesting facts of our body, especially the brain fact. And the brain capacity is considered to be virtually unlimited. Even in our mobiles, even in our Android phones, even in our laptops, we have a limited storage and spaces, no, to store any type of a file or any type of a document. But our brain, it's naturally, it can store unlimited storage because it's a supercomputer, and the brain is a supercomputer. The next myth is that the brain's information, when you talk about the brain's information, it can travel up to 268 miles per hour. So that is the important, interesting fact of a brain. The second one is that the spinal cord, on an average, the spinal cord stops to grow at the age of the 4. At 4-year-old, it stops to grow. That is the important fact of spinal cord. And of course, the spinal cord helps in the control mechanism in coordinating the signals from the central nervous system to the body, and it is a fantastic coordinator. The next fact will be the spinal cord. The spinal cord is nothing but it is the main source of communication. What communication? Where? Between the body and between the brain. Did you know that you use only 10% of your brain? So which means 90% we are not using. It's one of the myth. It's a myth that we are using only 10% of our brain to work. So just imagine. What about the 90%? What are we doing? We are not using it. The next interesting fact is that the human brain, especially the weight of the human brain is 3 pounds. And the brain can freeze. The brain freezes really. And also one more important is that the pieces of the brain tissues is the size of a grain. Is it not interesting? So I hope today's session was very, very interesting for you all. So in today's class, we saw about the brain, what is the central nervous system, and how the central nervous system is divided into, of course, the central nervous system is divided into brain and spinal cord. And what is the main function of the brain and spinal cord? Is to control and to coordinate the body. And of course, the first part of our central nervous system will be the brain. When you talk about the brain, what does this brain does? Of course, it does numerous and numerous of activities. Especially the brain layers, the divisions of the layers of the brain can be divided under 3 heads. The first one will be the forebrain, the hindbrain, the midbrain. And the forebrain, again, it's divided into cerebellum and diencephalon. And of course, this diencephalon is again divided into 3 heads. The epithalamus, the thalamus, the hypothalamus. And of course, the cerebrum, especially the Gurian-Salci region, again it's divided under the 4. The parietal lobes, the temporal lobes, the olfactory lobes, the frontal lobes, all these does beautiful coordination. Next, we learnt about the hindbrain, especially the midbrain. Then we learnt about the hindbrain. What is this hindbrain is? And of course, the hindbrain consists of and comprises of the 3 important district regions. One will be the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, and of course the pods were rolling. And finally we entered into the movements of plants, and in movements of plants we saw about the different movements, especially the phototropism, the geotropism. What is photonastic? What is thigmoprocesses? And we also saw about what is hydrotropism is. How plants, even when they don't have this endocrine system or any nervous system, they beautifully react and they respond to the stimuli, and that leads to the movement of the plants. And also we learned about how the coordination is beautifully carried out in plants. We also learned about the endocrine system, especially how the endocrine system is otherwise called, as it is called as the ductless glands. When you talk about the ductless glands, which means there is no connection with the tubules, but the secretion directly enters into the bloodstream so that it coordinates with the other organ to perform various cellular and metabolitic activities. And of course, we saw different types of glands such as the adrenal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland. Then we saw about the pancreas, which is the dual gland which secretes both exocrine and the endocrine glands. We also saw about the reproductive organs, especially the hormones like the gonads, which secretes, which is in response, which is very, very useful in secreting the male hormones and the female hormones. When you talk about the male hormones, it's the testosterone. Especially the female hormones, it will be the progesterone and the estrogen. So these are the beautiful coordination. Of course, the last but not the least, we saw about what is the feedback mechanism and how the feedback mechanism can be divided under two heads. The first feedback mechanism will be the positive and the negative feedback mechanism. So I hope this session was very useful to you children. You all benefit. So students, hope you all understood today's class. Hope you understood the concept of what is endocrine system and the functions of the brain. So if you like this video, please share the video, subscribe to our channel 2xion.com, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button right there. See you all in the next video in a new chapter, reproduction. Until then, it's me signing off. So you all take care. If you have any doubts or any queries, please post your valuable comments in the comment box. See you in the next video, children. Take care.